So critical thinking is actually a buzzword in 2024. It's one of those buzzwords that you hear it a lot in social media, you hear it a lot in social commentary. I'm beginning to pick up on this kind of this terminology a lot more in 2024. I don't know why, but it's becoming more prevalent. However, when I first came across it several years ago, as part of my working life, I had to train under various different programs, one of them being critical thinking. It was an essential part of my professional career, and I had benefited immensely from that experience. So I believe it is something that will be certainly, if you haven't done anything in this line of studies before, this will be a beginning, give you an insight. I've also got resources at the end of it that you can follow up on. There's also a free resource I've actually downloaded for you, so you can take that as a first step. But it's essential in the world you live in today because of the various sources of information and knowledge coming from all sides of the internet. You need to be a critical thinker in order not to fall into the pitfall of false information, malicious information, indoctrination, and all types of, you could say, falsehoods. You have to be a critical thinker. So a quote that I really like, and that's also in a study that's been published, you'll have a copy of that very, very essential resource as part of this unit. Critical Thinking, What It Is and Why It Counts by Peter, it's been spelled incorrectly, Peter Fatjon is one of the world leading experts when it comes to critical thinking, him and his wife. They've written books, articles, delivered lectures, training programs. These are leading figures when it comes to the field of critical thinking. And in the article, or in the paper, he cites a certain passage from a novel which was written by Anne Rice. So in this novel, there's a vampire, and one of the mortals who actually interacts with him questions him concerning life as a vampire, immortality, so on and so forth. To which the vampire responds, and he says, it's a fictional work, but it's very, very, the response is very, very important. Very few really seek knowledge. Very few people really seek knowledge in this world. Very few people would really seek knowledge, as in really seeking knowledge. I don't want to just hear information. We are passive consumers of knowledge. We go to school, we go to university, we sit in front of the television. Knowledge comes to us and we passively receive it, but we don't really seek knowledge. I'm going out to seek knowledge, is what you're doing today. You're going out to seek knowledge. Very few people in this world do that. Very few really ask. Very few human beings really ask. They want to know the reason for things, the why for things, the how for things. Exactly why is this the way it is? Very few people do that. Because to really ask is to open the whirlwind, the answer to which may annihilate the question and the questioner. Yeah, it's scary. To really ask, to really contemplate, to really seek the reason for things, it opens up a whirlwind. And most human beings, we're not ready for that sort of turbulence. We don't want to know, really know, because we are now cognizant of our limitation, our reality, and it may annihilate not just the question, but the questioner. So that's a very powerful passage. I find it very, very important. Sometimes we are willfully ignorant. I'm sure you've heard the very famous adage, ignorance is bliss. You know, ignorance is bliss. In other words, so long as we are ignorant of the reality of things, we will not be burdened with the reality that comes with that knowledge. So ignorance is bliss. Let us live an easy life. Let us not ask difficult questions about the purpose of life, about reasons for things, because that makes it difficult to enjoy life. Yeah. So very few people really ask for fear of being annihilated. Not just the question itself becomes redundant, but the questioner himself is not included in that. So we begin with this because when you are a critical thinker, you're actually going against the grain. You are someone who is asking the questions that others are afraid to ask or are not in a position to ask. And so you are to risk yourself of being annihilated by the answer that comes, you see. In the Quran, in Quranic context, because I'll be quoting Quran throughout this unit, it's very important. There is an ayah in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells the believers not to ask too many questions. Because if you ask too many questions, and if Allah gives you the answers, you may have a problem with the answers later on. And so Allah says in the Quran, do not ask questions that, if given the answer, will cause you problems. It doesn't mean that you're not a critical thinker. Islam doesn't encourage critical thinking. It just means that there are certain questions that when you ask them and you insist, it causes you problems. And the same happens when we have the example of Banu Israel in Surah Al-Baqarah, when Sayyidina Musa gave them the instruction to kill a heifer, to sacrifice it as an atonement, but also as a solution for their problem. And they began asking more and more questions. And in the end, it became a problem for them because they could hardly find what they were looking for now. They became so burdened by the responsibility of finding the specific heifer that it became a problem. So as a result of that, few people are critical thinkers because it takes a certain personality to want to know the reality of things. It takes a certain personality type to really insist on knowing things as they are. Most people are uncomfortable with realities. They don't want to know. As an example, when you ask somebody, how old are you? Or you insist, how old are you? When were you born? Beyond a certain age, we feel uncomfortable by that question. How much do you weigh? How much do you earn? These kind of questions, they make people feel uncomfortable. It's too close to home. It reminds them of something that is perhaps inadequate in them, that they're getting older, that they don't have a certain lifestyle. So it's more convenient just not to ask. Yeah. But unfortunately, the critical thinker has to ask because this is the reality of life we live in. You need to know. And there has to be you could say, a subset of society that fulfills that role of asking critical questions. There has to be. If all of us went along with the same mainstream mentality, we didn't ask critical questions, society as a whole is imbalanced. But if all of us are critical thinkers and we ask critical questions, there's also another imbalance. So there has to be a 5%, a 2% contingent in society that are critical thinkers. And this is the same as when the Sahabi would say, Ashab Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam would say, we would be pleased and content and keen when the Bedouins would arrive in Medina. We, the Sahaba of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, would be very keen when the Bedouins arrived in Medina. Why? Because the Bedouins would ask questions that we were too shy to ask. They had no reservation. They would come and ask, and they would ask in a very direct, straight to the point way. Directly. They would come into Medina, where's Muhammad? They wouldn't say, where's Rasulullah? They'll say, where's Muhammad? When they met him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they'll say, Ya Muhammad. And they began, straight to the point. If I fast, if I pray, if I make the basics, and nothing more and nothing less, do I enter Jannah? Yes, you will. That's it. And he went back. So these sorts of questions were direct, to the point. And the companions recognized that we need certain people in society who can ask those sorts of questions. So the rest of us can get the answer without the inconvenience of putting ourselves forward. So we need critical thinkers. We need people who are going to ask difficult questions in society so that the rest of us, if we are cognizant and aware, can benefit from their critical thinking. But it would be better if we were those people who are critical thinkers. That would be better. Okay? So that is something to keep in mind. It's always going to be a minority of people who fulfill that role. Sister Amina says, it's a bit of a catch-22. How do we find the balance between not asking things we have no business asking? This is exactly it. Yeah, you either become the person who asks the question or the person who is around when those questions are being asked. Somebody else asks the question, you benefit from the answer. Okay, it is a catch-22. However, I would say, personally speaking, in the age we live in today, it is essential for you to be a critical thinker because we are swamped with information. And the majority of it is actually misinformation. So it's important that you become a critical thinker, even if it may be against your personal inclination at times. You must be able to critically think and analyze in the world we live in. Deception is far too easy nowadays. Ayyamun kha'ina, the days of deception. One of the signs of the final day, Akhir zaman, is the days of deception. Deception increases. So it is almost a toolkit for survival right now in the age we live in today, that you become a critical thinker. Don't take anything face value. Critically think. I believe it was Denzel Washington who said that if you read the news, you are misinformed. If you don't read the news, you are uninformed. It's a catch-22. If I read the news, I'm misinformed because it's fake information. And if I don't read the news, I am uninformed. What do I do now? See? You become a critical thinker. And another quote that I like: think critically and question without fear. Okay? Don't question with fear. Question without fear. Seek out radically different solutions and voice them without reprisal. Read widely and deeply. Examine without end. Grow intellectually. I think he says everything. Okay. So now, in terms of methodology, there are 7 steps outlined in the document I've attached for you to read later on, inshallah. We're going to go through them quickly. How to actually go about being critical, a critical thinker, the actual methodology. The first, taken from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. The first one is to listen to understand, not to respond. It's very difficult. It's very difficult. You're listening not so you can debate and argue and catch them out. You're listening genuinely to understand. It said listen to understand, not to respond. Embrace silence. Be silent. Keep your mouth shut. Listen to that person. Let them express their thoughts. Listen to them properly. Be actively present. Focus on what they're saying. Don't just turn around. You're bored until it's your time to turn. Now you can talk. No. Be present. Ask more questions. So if you think that you've misunderstood something, ask them, can I clarify? When you said that, did you mean this? Have I misunderstood? Which shows that you're actually present. You're listening. And it's not about you. At the end of the day, it's not about you. It's not about you. It's not the ego. You're not feeling the ego. If you are debating and dialoguing with somebody else, it's not about you personally. It's not about them, but it's about the truth. So it says, listen to understand. And if you did this in any discussion and debate, you'd find that you'd actually be a lot more, you'd have a lot more to discuss and talk about when you listen to people. It may come across a certain way. Please, can you explain that again? Because it came across a certain way. Did you mean it that way? Or did you mean it another way? Yeah? And this can be found in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey. So, yeah, exactly. Have you finished? Exactly. Somebody may say to you, have you finished? Have you finished? All right. So I'm not listening. Have you finished? Are you done? It's my turn now. You be quiet. I'll talk now. You're not here to listen. You're here to argue. Yeah? And you will not be effective in your discussions with people if that's how you behave. So be quiet. Be present. If you need clarification, ask the question, did you mean it this way? And it's not about you at the end of the day. It's not about you. It's about the points and the case being discussed. Let the person speak. Let them speak. Show them that I'm listening to you. You know what? Let's sit down. Explain it from how you perceive it. Explain from your perspective. I'm listening to you. You know when you said that, did you mean it that way? Or where did you hear that from? I'm listening to you, right? And it's not about me, it's about this relationship here. Right? You can fix many problems with communication. As they say, when a war begins, the first casualty is communication. When a war begins, the first casualty is communication. Yeah? Problems begin when you no longer communicate. So you begin by listening to the person. If you listen to them properly. The second step is self-regulation. Begin with doubt, not certainty. So a wonderful example of this, and I always marvel at the wisdom, honestly, of Bilqis when she was brought to the palace of Sayyidina Sulaiman. And Sulaiman alayhi salatu wasalam, before Bilqis arrived to his kingdom, he challenged his entourage to bring him, because he heard from the Hudhud, the bird said to him that she has a massive throne. She has a massive throne in her kingdom. And so he asked his entourage, who can bring me the throne? And then Ifrit, a jinn, said, I can do it within a blinking of an eye. And the throne was transported to his palace, and he had it slightly modified. Okay, change a few colors here and there, add a bit here and there, and he kept it in a chamber. So when the Queen of Sheba arrived, Bilqis, and he hosted her, he opened the chamber and said to her, Ahakadha arshuk? Is that your throne? Does that look like your throne? Now the problem here is that Sayyidina Sulaiman is a mighty king, he's an emperor. And if she had said yes, she says to him, قالت كأنه هو. The wisdom in these 4 words, honestly, it shows she was very wise. She was a very wise woman. He shows her something that looks like hers, because when she left her kingdom, she had the throne locked behind a safe, a massive chamber. She locked it, according to the Mufassirun. She had it locked so that nobody could steal it. So when she arrives in this new distant land, and it looks like her throne, and he's saying to her, he's giving her a hint, is this your throne? She says to him, it is as if it is. Listen again. كأنه, it is as if it is. So she didn't say yes, she didn't say no, and she did not expose herself to being ignorant. Had she said yes, that would be a cause for concern. Why? Because you're accusing the king of being a thief. You're accusing the king of being a thief. If she said no, it would expose her ignorance, that you don't even recognize your own property. How can a person such as you rule an entire kingdom? So she says something in between. It looks like it is. It's genius, yeah? قالت كأنه هو. It looks like it is. And she doesn't say mine, she says is it. So with that answer, she negates the possibility of being accused of calling the king a thief, which will now offend him. Neither could she be accused of being a fool, because something that is clearly hers, she doesn't recognize it. So when you debate with people, when you engage in critical thinking, do not go with absolute statements from the beginning, because you're either going to offend the other person as you don't know anything, you're completely wrong, or you expose yourself as being ignorant, because later on you may come to the conclusion, actually, he was right. So be ambiguous. Leave a door open for potentially, maybe, I think. So for example, if I am discussing something, I would say, for example, what I read was, or this scholar said, you find in the books of historians, they always say this, it was said, it was reported. People have said, why? Because just in case what is being reported is false, they can say, listen, I just said it was said, I didn't say it was fact. You leave the door open. But when you come along and say it was a fact that it's happened, you can be misproved, you can be proven wrong, called a liar, if not even worse, right? So regulate yourself. Try not to be absolutist at the beginning. Try to be a bit balanced. Potentially, I may be wrong, but from how I've understood it, this is how it looks like. I could be wrong, but this is how I've understood it. You leave the door open. Do not begin with certainty. Begin with a bit of self-regulation. So Bilqis, her answer was perfect. قالت كأنه هو. Wisdom. Then we have another very important aspect. And this was something that Sayyidina Dawood fell into, unfortunately. It's a lesson for us to learn. Always, before you judge something, before you open your mouth and condemn or endorse or support or claim something, get the complete story. Complete information. Give me all the information. I'm not going to judge because of one person. Give me the entire story first and foremost, number one. Number two, context. Contextualize the information, please. Don't just take it out of context. Contextualize it. And finally, comprehension. So I've got all the information. I've got the right context. Have I understood it properly? And then you judge. In the famous incident in Surah Sa'd, Allah mentions there were 2 people who suddenly appeared. Sayyidina Dawood was in his own mihrab, praying in seclusion. And they appeared. إِذْ دَخَلُوا عَلَى دَاوُودَ فَفَزِعَ مِنْهُمْ. He was shook because How did you enter this place of seclusion? They were angels sent to test him, his wisdom. So one of them said, we have come for you to judge between us. We have a discussion, a debate, a disagreement. We are brothers and we have a discussion we couldn't completely agree upon. We have come to you, O Dawood, to judge between us. So the first person spoke and said, I have 1 sheep and my brother has 99 sheep. And we discussed and he said to me, give me your 1 sheep. And he managed to overwhelm me with logic and argumentation. And now he's claiming the 1 sheep that I only have 1 sheep. He has 99. Sayyidina Dawood did not listen to both sides of the story. What did he do? He began to give judgment straight away. He began to give statements and judgments. When he did that, they disappeared. They disappeared. And he realized, oh my goodness, subhanallah, I shouldn't have judged before getting the full story. So he made sajda and made tawbah. Allah says he made tawbah. He made tawbah. He made tawbah. Right? How many times do we listen to a story from one person only, one side only? We did not ask for context. We don't comprehend the full story. And we don't have all the pieces. We don't have the other person's perspective. We just made one judgment based on one person. It's a crime. It's a crime. So you have to first seek context. When did he say that to you? Why did he say that? When did he say it? Was he angry? What did you do to him before he did that? You know, with children, for example, I have, mashallah, many children, many sons. Every single day, 10 reports. He did this, he did that, he did this. First question is always, what did you do to him? What did you do to him? Where did it happen? Was anyone there to see it? I want all the context, and if possible, let him come and speak for himself before I judge, because it's not fair to take one person, one instance, one snippet and make a judgment. So Sayyidina Dawood made that mistake and he learned from that mistake. So that one man who had 1 sheep, we don't know whether that 1 sheep belonged to the other man in the first place, and he just lent it to him. We don't know the condition in which he had that 1 sheep to begin with. So to assume that he is the victim in this and the other man is greedy is not right. You need context. He didn't even get to speak. So Allah taught us through this incident, always seek context, complete information, and comprehension. Understand what you are about to make a judgment upon. Okay? Sayyidina Dawood made tawbah. So a critical thinker, you don't just jump because you saw an article that, oh, the Saudis did this, and you just jump straight to condemning. Seek all the information, please. Or the Iranians, or this, or that group, or that person did this, and you haven't sought any context, any completion, any comprehension, you condemn. Then the fourth methodology, the fourth method, which is very important, is to seek the why. What we know as the illah or the sabab. In fiqh, if you study fiqh, something known as illah or sabab. This is what makes a condition binding, or what causes a ruling to come into place. What is the reason why this law came into place? What's the reason why this has been legislated? You need to understand the why before you can talk about the what and the how. Why was this said? So I can understand it, then the rest can come into place. So the critical thinker always seeks the why, la raison d'être, the reason why. Okay? A beautiful example from Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, was an outstanding critical thinker. Very sharp, very sharp. One day he attended the gathering of Imam Malik in Medina, and the people did not know him. He was from Baghdad, from Kufa, Iraq. So he entered the gathering and just sat down next to a pillar, quietly. Imam Malik knew who he was, but the people around him did not know who he was. So after a while, Abu Hanifa stood up and he left the gathering. So Imam Malik said to the people, do you know who that man was? So we don't know who. He said, that was Abu Hanifa. If he wanted to convince you that the pillar was made of gold, he could do so. Yeah? If he wanted to convince you that this pillar was made of gold, he would be able to do so. Such knowledge and wisdom. So one day he went to the barber. This is an anecdote. And he said to the barber, I want you to shave my hair and please pluck out all the white hairs. Pluck them out. I'm getting white hair. Pluck the white hairs out. So the Barber says to him, Abu Hanifa, don't you know? If you pluck the white hair, they're going to grow twice as thick when they come back. So Abu Hanifa, he listened and he said, okay, in that case, pluck out the black hair, leave the white hair. Yeah. What he just did there was he sought the illah. So if you're telling me that plucking hair makes it grow faster and twice as thick, please pluck out the black hair so I can have more of it. So it's a wonderful example of just an amazing mind constantly working. And so, of course, the Baba understands, okay, that doesn't make any sense. You're right. Yeah. Another example is, yes, an example is also of the iddah period. When a man dies and his wife has to spend 4 months and 10 days, sometimes it's explained in a way that it makes people kind of, especially modern audiences, feel a certain way, you know. I remember sitting in a gathering once and the Imam explained this ayah. Allah says in the Quran that when a man dies, he has wives, widows, they should spend 4 months and 10 days in mourning, iddah. They can't marry, they can't go out, they have to spend 4 months and 10 days. And then he said that this is the reason, the illah, he's trying to explain now the illah, the sabab, the reason for this is that Allah wants to show the woman how great a man is above her. Yeah? That's what he said. Allah is demonstrating how great the status of a man above a woman is, that when her husband dies, she has to wait 4 months and 10 days. So I looked around and I found one of the recent convert brothers in the masjid. And I was observing to see his reaction to that. So at the end of the gathering, I went to him and said, Akhi, you heard what he just said about women and men are so great that, how do you feel about that? And he didn't want to offend me. He said, oh yeah, I guess, you know, that's what the Imam said. No, it's not correct. The illah is not that. That's not the illah. That's not the reason why Allah said. Because if that woman, her father died, does she have to spend 4 months and 10 days in iddah? No. If her son dies, does she have to spend 4 months? No. If her brother dies, no. So it's not a matter of man and woman. It's a matter of husband and wife. Furthermore, that's a general ruling for women. But if a woman was pregnant for 8 months and her husband dies in the 9th month and 3 weeks, and she gives birth 1 week later, her iddah is over. She doesn't have to wait 4 months. Her iddah is done 1 week later. He's married. She was pregnant for 9 months and 3 weeks. Sorry, 8 months and 3 weeks. In the final week, her husband dies. She gives birth a week later. She doesn't have to spend 4 months in iddah. Her iddah ends 1 week later. She can marry the next day. Or if she was a virgin and they never managed to consummate the marriage, and he dies, some schools actually say she should still wait out of good adab, but in practicality she can marry the next day. So it's not a matter of the man is greater, it's a matter of the illah is we don't want her to be pregnant and to go into another marriage. So we give that 4 month period. But if she's already pregnant, it's very clear she's already pregnant, she can't be pregnant twice. Her iddah can be as short as 1 week or 1 day, but it can also be 9 months. Yeah, so for example, she's pregnant 3 months, and it's very clear she's pregnant. The husband dies, her iddah is going to be 6 months after that. It's not going to be 4 months. So the point being, the reason behind this ruling is not what the Imam said, men are greater than women, Allah wants to show. That's not the illah. The illah is to preserve her honor and the lineage of the child unborn. Because she's pregnant 4 months is long enough to know that she was pregnant from her husband who died. Nobody will have any doubts about that. Yeah? So it completely changes the entire discussion. From one of Islam hates women, it puts women down, to actually Islam loves to make sure that things are clear. Even in the time of bereavement, Allah wants to make sure nobody's going to fall into a doubtful situation and be accused of zina later on or whatever it is. It's not about the man and the woman, it's about the illah that we need to make sure it's clear whose child it is. Yeah? So it changes everything. So seek the illah. And there it is. So I once gave an example to my son. I said to him, as we were walking to the masjid, yeah, I'm teaching him about the reward of walking to the masjid. We have cars. I said, no, we're going to walk. Because Allah, His Messenger said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whoever walks to the masjid, He makes wudu, he walks. Every step he takes, Allah removes the sin and elevates his status. So we walked to the masjid and we prayed, alhamdulillah. On the way back, halfway there, my son said to me, Dad, you know how you said when you walk to the masjid, you get a reward and a sin removed. Does that mean when you're walking away from the masjid, you get a sin? He took the information and said, look, if you're walking to the masjid, you get a reward for walking to the masjid. Does that mean when you're walking away from the masjid, you get a sin from walking away from the masjid? He's only 8 years old. Yeah, I had no answer to that because logically he took a logical premise and he stretched it. And he's right. Do I get a reward from walking away from the masjid? I had no answer. So this is where somebody took an illah from the text and applied it and took another question that now opens another discussion altogether. Yeah? So it's very, very important when you discuss with people, rather than the points they're making, look at the underlying premise, the illah. Why did he say this? What is he trying to get to, basically? What are you trying to get to with this statement? And we can move on from there. Number 5, interpretive skills. A critical thinker has interpretive skills. This means you don't read black and white. You're not literalistic. I've always said this. I always post this in the groups and online. Don't be a literalist. Don't be a literalist. Everything's black and white. You read it literally like a robot. Apply interpretive skills. It shows that you have a mind that can actually think of abstract concepts, not just black and white. 2 examples of this, and also advocacy, that you can put yourself in a position, somebody else's position, right? Maybe he said it because of this. You can try to advocate. When it comes to history, for example, historiography, one of the principles is advocacy. You have to advocate for the subject. So if you're writing about Hitler, don't write it from a condemnative phase. Think of it as why would have Hitler potentially done what he did? You have to try to advocate on the other side as well. It's part of the exercise of being a historiographer. So 2 wonderful examples is one of Sayyidina Isa, alayhi salatu wasalam. It's actually a Sahih hadith, wherein he took his companions, al-Asbat, no, not al-Asbat, al-Hawariyin, his disciples, and he would teach them by walking. One of his ways of teaching people was by walking and teaching, a specific method. He would walk and teach, alayhi salatu wasalam. And he once came across a dog that was about to die. The dog was about to die. It was diseased, it was sick, it was emaciated, it was just about to die. And he said to the students, what do you think of this dog? Describe to me the condition of this dog. And so they began, well, it's dirty, it's a dog to begin with, it's najas, it's dirty, it's about to die, it's sick, it's weak, look at it, it's old. And so when they finished stating the obvious, because the obvious is that it's a dog and it's old and sick, that's obvious, we couldn't all see that. He says, alayhi salatu wasalam, but have you seen how white its teeth are? Subhanallah. So look, you've pointed to me all the obvious black and white things, but have you noticed how white its teeth are? In other words, while you're looking for mistakes, I'm looking for reasons to advocate for the dog. And I could see that it has white teeth. Subhanallah. Imagine if you and I, when we discuss with people, we have debates, rather than looking for mistakes, we're looking for possible points that are good in that person. If you can find it in a dog, I'm sure you can find it in a human being. That's the point. If you can find it in a dog, an excuse, I'm sure if you look hard enough, you'll find it for a human being. Okay. Another example, a wonderful example, is Abu Hanifa again, rahimahullah. His students were once confronted. Somebody entered the majlis and asked the question, said, listen, I have a certain person that I'm thinking of and he has many attributes. I want you to give me a fatwa about that person. Is he a Muslim or kafir? So they began to listen. So he said, first of all, he eats meat. His food is not dabiha. He doesn't slaughter his food, halal. When he prays, he doesn't make ruku or sajda. When he goes to the masjid, when he goes to the cemetery, he laughs at the dead Muslims, and he cries for the kuffar in the cemetery, and he runs away from the mercy of Allah towards the fitna. Is this man a Muslim? So the students of Abu Hanifa, he told them, you answer first. They began to take Qala Allah, Qala Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, whoever doesn't do it. They began to give him fatwa. He's a kafir, 100% kafir. So when they're all finished, Abu Hanifa said, he is a perfect believer. So what? He said, he's a perfect believer. Because number one, he eats fish. He doesn't eat meat. So fish doesn't have to be slaughtered. Halal. So he eats fish. That's his diet. When he prays, he was praying janazah. Janazah has no ruku and no sajda. He was praying janazah. That's why he didn't make ruku or sajda. And when he finished, he went to visit the graveyard of the believers, and he cried and he laughed because he knows they're going to be in Jannah. So he's thinking about their Jannah, he's laughing, subhanallah, I can't wait to meet them. Then he looks at the kuffar and he cries because he knows they're going to be in Jahannam. Then when he finishes, he leaves this graveyard and he goes home. And on his way home, it begins to rain. So he ran from the rain, entered the house, hugged his family. Allah says in the Quran that we have sent the rain as rahmah. So reality is running away from rahmah. And the family is a fitna. So he ran from rahmah towards fitna. And so he said, this man is a perfect mu'min. So they realized the wisdom of Abu Hanifa. More importantly, that he was able to advocate even in cases where people couldn't imagine there's a case to advocate for. It takes a lot more intelligence to do that than to point out the obvious, to look for the faults. Okay, so a critical thinker can interpret things in a positive way, or can at least advocate. Maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe another. Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said to us that when you should make 70 excuses for the believer. 70 excuses for the believer before accusing them once. You should make 70 excuses for your believer, for your brother or sister in Islam. 70 before accusing them once. Yeah? It's a sign of not only good faith, intelligence. But if all you can see are bad things, all you can ever see, it's a sign of lowly thinking. You have lowly thinking. Everything is black and white, good, bad, mostly bad. No ability to think beyond that. Martin Luther King Jr. says, nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance. This is what we call in Arabic, Jahal Murakkab. Compound ignorance, that you are ignorant, but you don't know you're ignorant, and you're sincere about it. You know, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that some people are mukhlisin, and others are mukhlasin. What's the difference between mukhlisin and mukhlasin? Mukhlis and mukhlas, what's the difference? Sincerity. Somebody who is mukhlis, somebody is mukhlas, what's the difference? Okay, the difference is one person is sincere concerning something that is correct. Allah is one and He's sincere. The other one is sincere but concerning something that is not correct. They worship the son of Isa ibn Maryam as God. They're sincere, sincerely believe that. There's a difference. So he says here, nothing is more dangerous in all the world than a sincere ignorance. Why? Because when somebody is sincere in their ignorance, you cannot correct them. You can move the mountains. You cannot correct them. And they will never correct themselves because they don't believe they're doing something wrong in the first place. That's why we say, when somebody is jahil when it comes to the deen, it's difficult to make tawbah because you don't know that you have to make tawbah in the first place. You believe what you're doing is correct. You're not going to make tawbah because you're sincerely jahil. You believe you're doing the right thing. And then he says, in conscientious stupidity. This means, I know I'm being stupid. I know what I'm saying is not true. I know I'm being a bit illogical, but I am conscientious. I know it. But I insist on still doing it because it serves a certain purpose. So I know that as a Zionist, I'm going to go there. I don't belong in Palestine. I know that I'm from East Germany. I know that. Biologically speaking, historically speaking, I don't belong here. I know that. But I'm going to be conscientiously stupid and pretend that I'm actually from here. I belong. My ancestry comes from the Middle East. I know it doesn't make sense. I know that science doesn't prove it. I know history doesn't prove it. But I'm going to pretend that it is a reality. And if you pretend long enough, what happens? It becomes a reality for you. So Martin, he hit the nail on the head here. Somebody who is genuinely ignorant. He doesn't know, but he's sincere. Wallahi, This is the case. He's sincere. You can't correct that person. There's no correction. And they cannot correct themselves. And the level below that, somebody who knows very well. As somebody says, the famous quote in the Bible is, Lord, forgive them, for they know not. Yeah? And they said, Lord, forgive them, for they know exactly what they do. Yeah? Lord, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Lord, forgive them, for they know exactly what they do. That's the worst sin, that you know what you're doing is wrong, but you pretend that it's not wrong. These two people, if you ever interact with them, you have discussions, or you have an interaction, when you realize, the moment you realize this person is ignorant on the topic we're discussing, and they are sincerely ignorant, they have no clue that they're getting it wrong, walk away. Imam Ali would say, radiallahu anhu, if you argue with a fool, you become a fool. Imam al-Shafi'i said, when I argue with the fool, he increases his foolishness, I increase my silence. Just like fire burns the incense and increases its aroma. You don't increase your voice and speak, you reduce engagements immediately, because what you're doing is, the more you engage with that person who's ignorant sincerely, the more you lower yourself to their level. And somebody is conscientiously stupid, they know what they're saying is wrong and they insist on it. We have a statement, we have a proverb in West Africa. You cannot wake somebody who is pretending to sleep. If you're pretending to be asleep, I can't wake you up. I can't wake you up. Yeah, you're pretending to sleep on purpose, I can't. Another one is, if you're pretending to be lost, I have to pretend I can't find you. There's no point wasting energy and time and getting emotionally invested in something that you know you can't win to begin with. Because this person is either genuinely lost and cannot find a way, or this person is lost, they know they're lost, but they're pretending that they're not lost. There's no, between these two extremes, you're wasting your time. The best and appropriate solution is to say, ma'a salama. As Allah says in the Quran, وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ الَّذِينَ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ حَوْنًا وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. On the earth, they walk gently. عَلَى الْأَرْضِ حَوْنًا وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ. And when the ignorant address them, قَالُوا سَلَامًا. They say peace. They walk on. They don't even waste time trying to engage, because that's a waste of energy. You're only going to take away a lot of emotional damage, because they're going to get you angry. You haven't convinced them of anything. In fact, you've given them more ammunition to come back to you another day, to start all over again and trigger you. So Allah says, when you meet these people, Ibadur Rahman, when the Khatamul Jahilun, al-Jahil speaks to them, addresses them, what did it say? Salam. Assalamu alaikum. I have to go. I don't have time for this. It's the only answer, because if you are critically minded, you're trying to play a chess game while they're playing Connect 4. So, there's no way. You're playing chess and they're playing Connect 4. And you wonder why you're being frustrated at every turn. You're not playing the same game. The best thing to do is disengage, wish them well, and move on. Yeah. So this, I love the quote, because it's really, really, really something that it just puts into words something that oftentimes we have to go through. So there are 7 types of people. So I've given you the pyramid of all of the external, you could say external stimulants, external factors that can cause us to be misled or misinformed. There are typically 7 types of people, 7 reactionary profiles. There are 7 types of people. When information comes to them, they have a reaction to it. Okay, and it's important to know this, because you don't want to be one of the first 6. And when you come across one of the first 6, you need to know how to engage with them. Okay, so and finally, we have the critical, rational thinker. This is the 7th. This is the level where the person is impartial to begin with. They begin with ambiguity. They don't begin with certainty. They begin with self-doubt. They begin with the intention to discover truth and to submit to it. They begin with a rational mindset and an ability to listen to other people and to be willing to accept an alternative perspective, even if it goes against their own. This person here is the person we're going to spend our time looking into. The previous 6 are a waste of time. There's no point engaging with them. There's no point trying to convince them. They've already adopted a certain persona. They like it. It's comfortable for them. And they will continue that way. But the one who we want to learn from today is the critical, rational thinker. Okay? And I looked at many of the contemporary thinkers and ideologues of the Muslim world over the last 100 years. I couldn't think of a better example. There are many critical thinkers in our, to this very day, but I couldn't think of an example, a better example than Malcolm, because of the trajectory of life, where he went in his life, the various cycles of development he went through. One thing remained consistent with Malcolm: he was a critical thinker. He had principles, he stuck to them, he was consistent. And so through his life story, I want us to look at some of the most essential attributes of a critical thinker.
Welcome to HistoryYoon, the world's leading online learning platform specializing in Islamic history. Discover the HistoryYoon mobile app and participate in regular live and interactive seminars and tune in directly from your handset from anywhere in the world. Enjoy instant access to a growing catalog of on-demand streaming content exclusive to the platform, accessible from a variety of devices including desktops, tablets, and cell phones. Connect instantly with our global community of history enthusiasts via our private community forum. To find out more about our online history programs and resources, visit our website today at www.historyyoon.com.